Good afternoon. Welcome to the weekly livestock market update. I'm Brownfield anchor reporter Megan Grebner. With us, as always, to talk all things markets, University of Missouri, Scott Brown. Good afternoon, Scott.
Good afternoon, Megan.
All right. Kind of a slow week for us, but some big reports are ones that we always look forward to. We'll talk livestock slaughter numbers. We'll talk cattle on feed. But first, let's recap what happened this week in the markets.
Yeah, on the cattle side this week, good week. If we start with live cattle, we were up a little more than $2.50 this week on live cattle. Those feeder cattle auctions were unevenly but steady for the week as we look at those. On the futures side, October live cattle futures contract closed up 90 cents, and the September feeder cattle futures contract closed up $2.40. That strength in feeder cattle futures was driven, I think, in large part by what was almost a 30-cent decline in that September corn futures this week. Beef was stronger again this week. The choice box beef price up a little more than $27 for the week. That puts it $1.16 above where we were a year ago at this time. So pretty strong on that choice box beef price. And we really saw strength across the board and all the components of that choice box beef price this week. On the hog side, cash barrel and milk prices were down $3.40 on the week. The October lean hog futures contract closed up a little more than $2.15. The pork cutout value lost $1.40 this week on really weakness across the board on those pork components.
Let's talk weekly slaughter numbers as we take a look at this last week, a pretty decent week on the cattle slaughter side of things.
That's right. If you look at the week ending August 21st, 665,000 head of cattle estimated to be slaughtered this week. That's 29,000 head above where we were a week ago, and 14,000 head above where we were a year ago at this time. On the hog side, a pretty good run on hogs as well. 2.452 million head of hogs estimated to be slaughtered this week. That's up 45,000 relative to a week ago. But yet still down 173,000 from where we were a year ago at this time.
Livestock slaughter came out yesterday. As we take a look at those numbers, and we're talking specifically, and I should say came out on Thursday for those who are watching later. Beef production, pork production, as we take a look at that, let's talk beef production first. And really, to me, the number that jumps out is when we're talking about beef cow slaughter.
Yeah, absolutely, Megan. It certainly tells us something about cow numbers as we look ahead to 2022. If you look at that July beef production number, 2.3 billion pounds of beef produced according to USDA in July. That's actually down 4.3% from where we were in 2020, and even down from where we were in 2019. We're down 1.8% relative to 2019. Year to date, we're still up 16.17 billion pounds of beef produced year to date. That's 4.9% above where we were a year ago at this time. Weights were part of that, although weights were down in July by 1.9% at 818 pounds. Year to date, those weights are up 0.1% thus far. Now, as you mentioned, the big story here is, of course, beef cow slaughter. For July, we were actually up 8.6% relative to July of 2020. And just for comparison, that's up 12.5% relative to where we were in 2019. And year to date, it's about the same. Year to date, beef cow slaughter up 8.1%, and versus 2019, it's up 12.4%. So very strong beef cow slaughter. Continues to tell me things like drought and maybe economics that haven't been as good are certainly going to be at play when we get next January's beef cow count.
There really is going to be a lot for us to chew on for the rest of the year as we talk about profitability, bottom lines, and risk management, and what the cattle industry and beef numbers look like moving forward. Not to take anything away from pork production numbers, those also came out on Thursday.
Yeah, that's right. So pork production for July, 2.1 billion pounds of pork produced in July. That's 13.6% below where we were a year ago at this time. Now, well, I want to keep that in perspective because we were pushing a lot of hog slaughter in July of 2020, trying to catch up. But relative to 2019, still down 7.3%. So pretty amazing the change in pork production this year. Now, year to date, relative to a year ago, we're down 0.6% in pork production. Now, relative to 2019, we're still up 2.2%. Weights matter here as well. So 210 pounds was the July average dressed weight for hogs. That was down 0.5% from where we were in 2020. Yet when you look year to date, we're up 0.1% in terms of hog dressed weights.
It definitely is really interesting to see how these numbers, not just are comparing to 2020 because of that asterisk that goes along with the COVID year, but how they're comparing back to 2019 in a year where we saw big production as well.
Yeah, that's right. I think, again, it begins to remind us that we've changed, and frankly, both of these industries, as we think about what's been happening in 2021, what was a period of time with, frankly, very strong supply growth. We now have a year where we've backed away from that strong supply growth. That's helped us on the price side. So we often talk about how strong demand is. I just want to remind us we're getting maybe even higher prices than otherwise would be the case, because for the first time in a few years, we're talking about a very small growth, if any, in terms of red meat production for 2021.
When we were in Nashville at Cattlemen's, that was really one of the fascinating topics to hear folks talk about, whether it was economists, whether it was cattlemen, whether it was industry folks as well, is what the demand picture is looking like for beef. And, you know, we don't ever want to put all of our eggs in one basket, right? Like we don't want to solely rely on China, but for that to show the growth that it's seen and helped as much as it has is fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, we don't want all our eggs in one basket. I keep saying that, you know, when you're talking about all the growth coming in one country, we only have to look at soybeans and think about the tariffs put in place back in 2018, 2019 to remind ourselves that we don't want to be dependent on one country for too large a percentage of beef trade. Now, that's not happening yet on the beef side. It's just we've got a lot of growth happening to China. We still talk about Japan, South Korea, Mexico being strong markets or larger markets for us, but the growth certainly this year has been China. And then I'll say, let's not forget, we've gotten pretty strong domestic demand growth happening as well as we came out of much of the slowdown, shutdown of food service in this country.
Cattle on Feed report came out this afternoon, and not necessarily a snoozer, but kind of not real exciting.
So sometimes I'll say, well, maybe it's good news in that it came in relative to what most folks would have thought pre-report for the most part, and where it did actually is a little more positive. So, you know, we could see cattle prices go higher again next week. We'll see where these markets go, but on feed as of August 1 came in at 98.1. That was very, very near the pre-report midpoint. So not a lot of difference there in terms of the on feed numbers. Placements in July, however, coming in at 91.1 of a year ago. That was at the low end of pre-report estimates. The midpoint was coming in at 93. So I don't want to get too extreme in my discussion there, but we're talking about smaller numbers of placements that I believe at some point will spell even stronger prices as we get later in the year. So maybe there's some opportunity here to get much more optimistic about cattle prices as we finish 2021.
Scott, before I let you go this afternoon, and I don't think we can have a conversation about cattle numbers in general and not talk about drought conditions. All of South Dakota latest drought monitor is in some section of drought from D0 to D4, I think is when I looked at the map, but that's not just there, there's other parts of the country as well. When we talk about this, we know that there's been some liquidation, but are we also maybe watching where those cattle end up? Maybe they're not going into the supply chain, but maybe get moved somewhere else.
Yeah, so I think we have all the above. So I had the opportunity on Monday to drive in South Dakota and North Dakota, and the amount of road ditches that were being baled. So I always say maybe not the best quality hay, but still being put up, moving, and a lot of hay moving on the interstate. It just shows you just how dry it is in some parts of the Dakotas that are going to affect us. You're right. So we're slaughtering cows, as the data suggests from slaughter report this week. But anecdotally, you can certainly hear some cows moving to other parts of the country, trying to find a home until maybe the worst of the drought conditions subside in some parts of the country. We don't know how long that is. We don't know how long those cows can hold on in other parts of the country as well. I anecdotally hear a little more dryness here in places like Southwest Missouri, starting to crop up again here late in the season. But I think we are going to see some of that movement happening. And I sometimes say maybe at the end of the day, the effect on inventory numbers in total will be less than we might have anticipated, only because we moved cows to other parts of the country that are in better shape in terms of grass availability.
Scott, always great to see you as we look ahead to next week. What reports are we watching for?
Yeah, so next week we'll start the week with a cold storage report, and then midweek we actually get another inventory count that will be both U.S. and Canada cattle and hogs mid-year that we'll get next week.
Fantastic. We will talk to you next Friday.
That sounds good, Megan.
To have our weekly livestock market update delivered to your email box every Saturday morning, go to brownfieldagnews.com, click subscribe. You can also submit questions and comments there as well. And if you're in the cab of the tractor, combine, truck, wherever, Brownfield's got some great podcasts to offer. brownfieldagnews.com/podcast. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you next Friday. I'm Megan Grebner for Brownfield.